So tell us about the genesis of this album. Was it your pandemic project?
Yes. As much as maybe I don't want to say that, is I have to acknowledge that it happened during a very difficult year. Everything was just completely stopped here in New Orleans, so I found myself being like, well, I have to do something. I don't know what's gonna happen. So that kind of pushed me to just go to the studio and just do it without overthinking it too much anymore.
The title is Inertia. How was that theme in mind for you?
Well, that theme to me speaks of the process. I think about improvisation. Like when I'm at the piano, like I like this music to sound as if there was no uh, obstacles, nothing to interfere with. Like just to let it be whatever it needs to be. If it's moving or if it's still, whatever the moment calls for. So that's where that name's come from.
Jazz and classical are your two worlds, and they're worlds that both prioritize preservation and progress at the same time. How do you balance those in your playing?
Uh, that's a very, very good question. I like to see it all as one thing, which I think is what helps me just navigate both worlds simultaneously. I grew up studying classical music and discovered jazz almost by accident. I didn't go to school for jazz where I'm from, Honduras. So I was just exploring on my off time when I was not practicing classical music. I was just discovering, see, what can I learn? What is this chord I don't know the name of? And things like that. So I like to keep the strictness of the classical music. Like I like to see myself like, oh, it's like I'm playing a role, right? I'm an actor, so I have to what this person meant with this composition, or what was the style of the time, or how would pianists of that era would play this. Whereas if it's jazz improvisation, then it's pure me. Like what am I bringing to the table? So that I like to go back and forth in those two different mindsets.
Four of the tracks are improvised. Is that right? Four. I want to ask the bold question. When
Yes.
you improvise for an album, do you only do
Yes.
one take?
That was an interesting process because yes, just the one take. Actually, the first track of the album, Pendulum, was the first thing that I played at the session that day. Misha Kashkashishvili, the sound engineer, he was like, "Okay, Oscar, let's try see if we can get some sounds out of the piano, see if, what happened." So I improvised in that state. So yes, for those there were no second takes, just one.
Does it feel like more pressure or less pressure in that case?
I think I've been learning, or I've been trying to learn not to feel any pressure in that regard. I used to force myself to play in public, to improvise in public, because I would feel so free and so weightless at the practice rooms when I was practicing by myself, and then just start improvising. It's like, man, this sounds. I feel good, but I didn't feel that way in public because I was overthinking and that pressure. So after a while, I think I'm in a place right now where I am very comfortable in that space, which allows me to experience that freedom in communicating, something that goes beyond words.
So, having experienced this yourself, how should a classical artist who thinks, wow, improvisation, I'd really like to attempt that because it's so little of
Mhm.
what we learn in the conservatory.
Yes.
Um, how should or could a classical pianist approach improvisation for the first time?
Well, I started this process of learning how to improvise as a classical musician, as a classical pianist. I didn't go to school. Like you said, our schools, if you go to college for classical music, very little improvisation is touched. Um, so what I used to do, let's say I was studying a piece by Bach, then I would just try to pay attention to the chord changes, like, oh, that's a D minor, A major, this is a sequence. And then I would just try to use whatever the piece devices, whatever the rhythms or the figures or the patterns on those harmonies, and see if I can just elaborate on that. So I would repeat a cycle of chords using bars, figures, or rhythms until it felt natural. And I could just, what if I do that in A minor now? So at the beginning, it was not jazz. Like all my improvisations sounded like whatever I was studying at the time.
One of the pieces on your album seems to pay tribute to Chick Corea. And
Yes.
you recorded the album in
Oh,
2020,
this
correct?
was the October 2020. Yes.
So you recorded it before he passed away, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
What was your relationship with Chick Corea?
He was one of my biggest influences and mentors without knowing him, or never actually got to see him play live. I think he was going to come to New Orleans in 2020 for the Jazz Fest. But his music is so alive that I feel like I've been coached, I've been mentored by his music from an early age, but also by his philosophy of music. Like if you look at his work, he doesn't stay in one world. Like he releases 4 albums a year, and each of them are like different styles, different ensembles, different sounds. Like it's amazing. So that openness to just this world of music, no matter what, that probably was the biggest influence that Chick had on me. Yeah.
Since you're in New Orleans, I have to end with a New Orleans question because I feel like it's how every meal in New Orleans goes. What was your last great restaurant meal?
My last great restaurant meal.
Or
Is
most
this
recent?
most recent? Yes. There's this place in the Marigny neighborhood, which was my first neighborhood in New Orleans. The first house I moved in was in the Marigny. I'm in Uptown now, but I like a place there that's called Paladar. So it's a fairly new restaurant there, and yeah, that was just delicious meal that I can remember now.
And in New Orleans, it sounds like people can find you at the Elysian.
The Elysian Bar, which is located right now at the St. Peter and Paul Church. I'm there every Sunday brunch from 11:30 to 1:30, and Monday nights 7 to 9.
Terrific.